How's it going, everybody? Welcome to 1IQ Sports Talk. Brendan and Sterling coming at you for week 3 game picks as we're changing a few of the things up here moving forward for the way that we'll be bringing you guys videos. We're still going to be having the podcast, but we're breaking stuff down into a little bit shorter segments. And for this one, again, the game picks are still going to come out on Saturday afternoon. And that is exactly what we're doing here today. So just jumping into it right away, Sterling, week number 3, the first game up on the docket is the Giants taking on the Cleveland Browns, and the Cleveland Browns are minus 6.5 point favorites.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. The Giants have been abysmal this season. Absolutely horrible. They came close to winning a game last week and managed to set a new record, being the only team to, score 3 touchdowns and still lose without giving up a touchdown, as they gave up 7 field goals. The Giants do not inspire hope. The Browns have been equally disappointing. I mean, it hasn't been good. Sean Watson looks bad. From what I hear, Myles Garrett is dealing with an injury that could be an ongoing issue for him for the remainder of his career. And so it's going to be very interesting. That being said, I'm still going to take the Browns because I don't see a way the Giants come up with a win. Giants aren't going to get a win at this rate until they play the Panthers in Germany with the way things are going. So, yeah, I got the Browns winning this, and they will cover that spread because I don't have a whole lot of confidence in the Giants.
Yeah, this is a weird game between two bad teams. Again, the Browns ended up getting the win over the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. And again, the Jags, we're going to talk about them in a later video here, but or later in this video and in a later video. It's just
Yeah.
one of those things where that team is just bad. But the Browns ended up finding a way to get the win, but they are likely going to walk away from week 3 going 2-1 with that lone loss coming in week 1 where they just look horrific. That just shows how bad this Giants team is. And Daniel Jones, we've been asking for him to be benched for a while now, and the Giants have committed to him and said no, we are sticking with him. And I just continue to sit back and go, okay, he didn't turn the ball over last week, but he also wasn't special last week either. You know, having Malik Neighbors there is absolutely huge, but you're not going to be able to rely on Malik Neighbors every single week. And this Browns defense is really, really, really good. Even still with Myles Garrett, being a little bit banged up, I have the Browns winning this game. However, I do think just with the Browns offense not being particularly great, I think this game will actually be a little bit closer than we initially expected. So I actually have the Giants covering that 6.5 point spread. But it's one of those things where the Browns offense is, I don't want to say equally as bad as the Giants, but they're not far apart.
It's trending that direction for sure.
Next game that we have up on the docket is the Tennessee Titans taking on the Green Bay Packers, with the Tennessee Titans minus 3 point favorites.
Yeah, I'm surprised the Titans are favorites here just with how poorly they've also played thus far this season. I understand the Packers are without Jordan Love, but even last week without him, they managed to get it done. And so with an extra week worth of practice in there, as long as there's no lineman throwing up on the ball before they snap it to Malik Willis, I think the Packers will likely continue on this squeaking out wins trend that they've got going right now, just trying to get by until Jordan Love comes back. I don't have a lot of faith in that Titans offense. I know the defense is good and they'll be able to get some pressure on Malik Willis, and likely it's going to be an ugly game no matter what, but I do think the Packers are going to win this one.
So for myself, I actually have the Tennessee Titans winning this particular game, mostly because the game that the Packers ended up winning last week was against the worst defense in football with the Indianapolis Colts. Right now, they're 31st in actual total defense, but they're 32nd in run stopping defense. And when you have Josh Jacobs, you're going to be able to run the ball pretty efficiently with that guy, especially against that bad Colts defense.
Mhm.
But this Titans team, pardon me as I, try to congest or get the morning congestion out of my throat. This Titans defense, they're they're a really good defense. I would probably say they're closer to a top 10 than a top 20. They're kind of in that top 15 range. I think they're going to be able to give Malik Neighbors a lot of pressure and a lot of concern. And when Malik Willis has pressure coming towards him, he typically really struggles. It's just at this point, if you're the Titans, you just got to look at Will Levis and say, please, for the love of God, don't give the game over to the other team. And so that's why I actually have the Packers covering this 3-point spread. I think this is going to be a really, really close game just because you have a defense going up against a offense that has a bad quarterback in for the Packers, but you also have the Titans offense that at moments can look good, but you can't really trust Will Levis to actually win you a game at this point. And so those are the reasons why I have the Titans over Packers, but Packers covered the spread. Next game up here is my Chicago Bears heading into Indianapolis to take on the Colts. And the Colts are 1-point favorites in this one.
Yeah, I was surprised to see the Colts as favorites in this one. That granted they are probably the best 0-2 team we've seen so far, but as you mentioned, that defense is not very good. And they're going up against a Bears team that was able to, for the most part, hang with the Texans. They couldn't pull the win out last week, but it was competitive throughout. The defense just lit it up against that Texans team, and I think they're going to really look forward to going up against Anthony Richardson this week as well. And so I do think the Bears are going to win this. That is a very tiny spread, but since I'm picking the Bears to win, it doesn't matter because that means they've covered that spread.
Yeah, this is two teams right now that are looking at each other early in the season, and we always talk about teams and their get right games. We talked about the Jets going into this week 3 matchup against it was against the Patriots, and I was saying this is the Jets get right game of where it's kind of like, okay, we've started to find our identity as a team. And both of these two teams are looking at each other going like, this is our get right game. And for the Colts, this is them going, we're going to be more consistent on offense. And for our defense, we're going to show that we are a better defense than what the first 2 weeks have shown. And then for the Bears, it's going, we're just going to find our offensive identity. And Caleb Williams is going to kind of have that game. For the Bears in this one, the biggest problem for them has been the lack of running attack and their offensive line. But when you're going up against literally the worst run defense since 1978, which funny enough, the last time that we saw a team like that in 1978, that was funny enough also the Indianapolis Colts. So if you're the Bears, you have to be looking at this game going, we have to run the ball against this squad. We need to get DeAndre Swift going. We need to be able to get Caleb a little bit more play action opportunity. And the way that you get play action to get going is by running the football. And we saw again, Caleb Williams against the Texans be able to hit those short passes and quick passes. He was the 6th fastest quarterback in terms of snap to getting the ball out of his hands. So we know he can do that. And I think the Bears ultimately, they get this, this get right game moving. They find a little bit more of their offensive identity, and I think Caleb Williams takes this Bears team to a fairly comfortable victory while Anthony Richardson struggles against this Bears defense. The Texans head up they take on the Minnesota Vikings, and the Texans are only -2-point favorites.
Yeah, this is one of the battle of undefeateds this week. 2-0 teams going head to head. Texans, who are a top of the league considered team. CJ Stroud has been impressive. They're able to get it done, whether it's a shootout or whether it's a big defensive battle like we saw last week, where Stingley and Will Anderson just turned it on and started shutting that Bears offense down. This Texans team, they just keep getting better every week, and it's hard to bet against them for sure. The Vikings at this point, have been surprising a lot of people, I think, sitting at 2-0. I don't think anybody expected Sam Darnold to have this good of an impact this early on. Having Justin Jefferson helps, and utilizing him more has been helpful as well. And the fact that at this point Aaron Jones has stayed healthy and has looked sort of like vintage Aaron Jones, it makes this Vikings offense formidable. But their defense is still lacking, in my opinion, and the Texans will take advantage of this week for sure. You know, you got too many weapons on that Texans team. You know, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs. You know, and can't forget about Joe Mixon running the ball now. It's this team is too good, and so the Texans will pull this win out. What did you say the spread was? It was
-2 for the
-2.
Texans.
Yeah, the Texans cover that spread easy.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit shocked to see that this spread was so low for the Texans, and the Vikings have pretty good odds with this one. When you look at the Vikings defense and go, they have given up a lot of yards. Again, Brock Purdy, 312 passing yards last week, the one touchdown to George Kittle, but it's one of those things where this Texas team, everything is going. Their defense is stellar. I ultimately just look at this game and go, the Vikings are probably going to be in for a pretty rude awakening with this week of going, hey, the Texans are looking at this going, we just beat up on the Bears. We're not afraid of what we can do to you because their defense is significantly better, and we were still able to put up some good numbers against them. And that Bears defense, probably a top 3 unit in the NFL right now. So we're not worried about your secondary. We're not worried about your linebackers. Your D line might be able to do something against us, but other than that, we are just going to dominate this game. Texans win. Texans, I think, pretty easily cover that 2-point spread.
Yeah.
Philadelphia Eagles head down to New Orleans to take on the Saints, where the Eagles are -2.5 point favorites in this game.
I mean, the Eagles absolutely imploded last week against the Falcons.
Looked like the
And
Eagles of last year.
that's exactly what I was going to say. That is concerning because we saw this from them so much at the end of last year. And we thought, okay, new coaching staff, things are going to be better. Nope, same issues. And so not having A.J. Brown definitely was felt. You know, I don't think people expected that as much since you've still got so much star power, but not having him out there was a big problem. And they don't have him again this week. And I think it's just going to remain a problem. Going down against the Saints team that week one, we thought, okay, well, you beat up on the Panthers. That's not surprising. We expected that. And then week two rolls around and they just casually told the Cowboys to sit back down. And they just ran the score up and beat up the Cowboys. And it's like, okay, this Saints team might actually be for real this year. And for that reason, I am picking the Saints to beat the Eagles because I just the Eagles are going to bounce back. They'll be competitive. They'll be able to score. But as good as this defense is, for some reason, they cannot stop the opposing offenses from just imposing their will. You know, like this defense has been built so well through the draft. It is one of the most stacked that we see on paper. But when you give primetime Kirk Cousins a game-winning drive, that's concerning because that guy does not usually perform well in prime time, and he made it look easy. He made it look like he was playing against the Panthers defense in that final drive. It was bad, that Eagles team. And so yeah, I'm taking the Saints to win this game. I don't think the Eagles should be considered favorites.
Yeah, I look at this game and I go, the Eagles, they had a tough matchup week number 1 against the Packers in Brazil. Week 2, they looked like going into the fourth quarter, they were controlling that game. And then they just allowed this Falcons team to come back in and ultimately get the W. And it really, I think, just shows back to some of the stuff that we talked about last year, like you were touching on it. And then again, we talk about this defense being really stacked on paper. We need to remember that last year, what was the Eagles' biggest issue on defense? It was their secondary. They have a very, very young secondary. They have two rookies back there. James Bradbury, their top guy, isn't out there at the moment. So it's one of those things where they're kind of getting this trial by fire, unfortunately, and they're kind of learning on the job. However, with this, I still think this Saints team has been kind of playing with house money at the moment, and I think the Cowboys didn't really expect them to be as good. They might have kind of been previewing their game against the Ravens, going, we aren't really worried because they we saw the Saints beat up a handicap kid in the Panthers, and it might have just been a situation where the Cowboys didn't take them serious. I think the Eagles right now, they're looking at this Saints team going, if we don't take this team seriously, we are going to easily get defeated. I think Nick Sirianni is going to have this team very, very focused and saying, we need to play at our very, very best to win this game.
Mhm.
And I think Vic Fangio just getting more and more comfortable with some of the younger guys that are on this team. He's going to get them playing a little bit better. I think this is going to be a close one, but I do have the Eagles winning this game, and I do have them covering this 3-point spread, because if they can stop Alvin Kamara, they can put themselves in a really, really good position to look at Derek Carr and say, is it time for a diaper change?
Yeah.
And they have the defensive line to go after him, and we know when Derek Carr gets pressured, that's when the wheels start to fall off. And so for me, I'm not quite ready to look at the Eagles and say that collapse from last week is going to be something that carried over from last year to this year, and we're going to see it continue. I just think right now the Eagles are still I'm still comfortable taking them, but if they have another fall off like this next or this week, it's a situation where we can go, okay, Eagles, it might be time to change not just the coordinators, but Sirianni, because this is something that has been happening entirely too often. Next up, we have the Chargers taking on your Pittsburgh Steelers, and we have the Steelers at +3 points.
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see the Steelers picked as favorites. We finally get a home opener this week, so that'll be nice to see. But I almost preferred them as underdogs because they seem to play harder when they're the underdogs these days, and so that's a little disappointing. Justin Herbert right now is questionable though. We don't know if he's going to play. He's got a bit of a high ankle sprain, and honestly, high ankle sprain playing against this defense, that's a recipe for season ending. And so I almost hope that he doesn't play for his own health, because you're just going to aggravate that injury trying to get away from guys like TJ Watt. And so that's one spot that we have to be careful for sure. This is going to be a gritty, gross game though. I mean, we got the two top defenses, 1 and 2 in the league right now for least points allowed, and I expect to see that probably continue, and it's going to be very low scoring. It's going to be very messy. I would love to see Justin Fields finally get over 200 yards. I don't think it'll happen. I would love to see it. If the offense can clean up the penalties, then that's going to happen. We saw it last week where, George Pickens had two big catches, one for a touchdown, one for a 40-yard gain, that both were called back for offensive penalties, whether that be holding or interference or whatever it was. And so if they can clean that up, then this Fields Pickens connection is starting to gain some traction, which is promising moving forward. And so that's really what it is if the offense can clean up the penalties, it's going to be good moving forward. I do think home opener against this Chargers team, this is going to be a tougher test. It would be harder if Justin Herbert was 100%. He's not. And so I do think the Steelers are going to be able to pull this win out. I think the Chargers will cover that spread, though. I think it's going to be really close, like a 1 or 2 point game by the end of it.
Yeah, for me, I'm not worried about the high ankle sprain for Justin Herbert. The way that we've seen this team play this year, which is we are going to run the ball down your throat and have fun trying to stop us. We saw Jim Harbaugh put 8 guys on the offensive line to block for a running play. He literally has shown we are going to run the ball. Have fun trying to stop us. And the Steelers defense is good. They might genuinely be the best defense in football right now, but I also look at this Chargers defense and exactly what you're saying. You have 1 and 2 technically going up against each other right now. I look at what the Steelers offense is going to be able to do to the Chargers defense, and I go, this Chargers offense is going to do a much better job against this Steelers defense, mainly because they have more people around them. I trust Justin Herbert a lot more, and Jim Harbaugh is going to walk in there and go, listen, I'm not worried about this team. You guys don't have an offense to compete with ours. And if we can just run the ball on you guys, again, you put it best. This is going to be an ugly game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Chargers are ultimately going to walk away with a victory here. And I think, again, they're going to cover that spread. This is one of those matchups where this is going to be a coaching battle between Jim Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, and unfortunately for Mike Tomlin, I think Jim Harbaugh is just going to have his team playing a little bit better. Again, it's Tomlin's defense versus Harbaugh's offense. That's going to be the really fun battle to watch. And then unfortunately, you have the handicap kid over here with the Steelers offense versus, the slightly less handicapped kid that's, big and strong with the Chargers defense. And so, unfortunately, buddy, I just think I think the Chargers come in and take this one. They've just played really consistent. They've looked really confident with kind of what they've been doing. And until this Steelers offense shows that they can move the ball with consistency against actual teams, because again, week 1 they played they played the Falcons. Don't have a great defense.
Yep.
Week 2 went up against the Broncos. Don't really have much, and they couldn't really do much. And so for me, those are the reasons why I'm choosing Chargers over the Steelers.
That's fair. I mean, similar things could be said about the Chargers. They had the Panthers last week, which is pretty Swiss cheese to be going up against, so it was expected.
But they also had the Raiders defense as well.
Yep, they did have the Raiders in week 1. But yeah, it's just there's a lot of familiarity with J.K. Dobbins, so I'm confident that this team, because they've got to see him so much with the Ravens, they know some of his tendencies and how he likes to cut the ball, and so I think they'll be able to keep him corralled. Which, if you can stop Dobbins, then you stop this Chargers offense completely.
Justin Herbert still is one of those guys that I just look at and go. But I know what you mean, though. If you can slow this Chargers running attack down, you have a much better chance at winning. It's just, again, I just look back at that Steelers offense and go, the fact that you went up against a worse defense in the Broncos last week and managed to put up less points than what you did against the Falcons, I just throw my hands up and I go, man, I don't know. I don't know. Moving forward, we now have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and speaking of the Denver Broncos, where those two teams meet up, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are -6-point favorites.
Yeah, that's a hefty spread, but this Broncos team is really bad. The Bucs have been lighting it up. They beat up on the Lions last week, which surprised a lot of people. Baker Mayfield, he's playing like the quarterback the Cleveland Browns drafted him to be, but they weren't patient enough to wait for him to come to this. The Panthers had a shot at him as well, and they let him walk. And both of those organizations are probably kicking themselves now because Baker Mayfield is making a case for himself this year to be considered in the top 10. He has been good. And as long as he's got Mike Evans out there, he said it best. He's like, if Mike's one-on-one, I'm throwing it up. I'm heaving it because it's better than 50-50 shot he's going to come down with it. And this Bucs team, I haven't really seen any real flaws at this point. And so until they go up against a team that's able to expose some of these, the Bucs are going to keep climbing. And so the Bucs are going to win this game, and they're going to cover that spread pretty easily because I don't have confidence in Bo Nix and the Broncos to be putting points on the board quite yet. This is a Sean Payton project.
Yeah.
It's going to be probably middle of next season before we really start to see what his vision with Bo Nix is truly set to be. It
Really
took a
just the
while with him
vision
with
with
Drew
this
Brees
team.
to get that way. And so I think it's going to be a long, slow project, but I mean, Sean Payton's shown he can do it before. It's just not going to happen yet.
Yeah, and I know when we initially put out our rankings for the quarterbacks going 1 to 32 and we did a very long discussion, you kind of looked at me and said, "How can you have Baker Mayfield in the top 10?" I said, "Man, listen.
Yeah.
He's that guy." And I think I've always been very high on Baker. I've always had complete confidence in him when he was drafted out of Oklahoma. He changed the Browns team. They gave up on him because they gave him a season of where he had a hurt shoulder, a hurt throwing shoulder, and their coaching staff said, "You know what? We know his throwing shoulder is hurt. We're still going to throw the ball 45 times a game." And then they said, "We're going to move on from him because we want Deshaun Watson," and goes to the Panthers. Again, the Panthers are the Panthers. They're an absolute joke and a mess. Goes over to the Rams. He played so well for the Rams. I threw up my hands and said he should be the starting quarterback for the Rams moving forward over Matthew Stafford. They should trade Matthew Stafford away and dedicate their entire rebuild with Sean McVay to Baker Mayfield. Doesn't happen. He goes over to the Buccaneers, wins the starting job last year, plays really, really well, and now we're seeing just that continuous evolution of Baker Mayfield. And this Broncos team, they're a young rebuilding team. They're a team in kind of this first year of like them kind of sitting back going like, we know we're in a rebuild right now. We have our young quarterback with our experienced head coach. It's not going to look pretty this year. I really think that the Broncos are saying to Bo Nix right now, we don't care if you break Peyton Manning's interception record this year. Go out there, throw 30 picks if you need to. We are just like, the expectations are that low for this team this year that if you can go out there, get a couple of wins, sure, this is great, but we're going to get you much more talent. And Sean Payton, we know what he's capable of doing, but unfortunately in this game, the Bucks are just going to be too much at home. The Bucks are just going to be too much for this Broncos team to handle. Pat Surtain is going to be matched up against Mike Evans all day long, but you still have Chris Godwin. You still have some of the other talented players on that Bucks roster. But yeah, it's going to be an easy game for the Bucks, I would have to imagine.
Yeah.
Next up is one game that I'm actually kind of excited to watch just to see how it goes, where we have the Raiders taking on the Panthers, and the Raiders are 6-point favorites, and this comes after Bryce Young got benched this week.
Yeah, so I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see what Andy Dalton can do. I said it would be incredibly funny if all of a sudden the Panthers come out with Dalton and they put up like 35 points and they win a game. It would be hilarious to see. That being said, we've seen what the Panthers can do with Baker Mayfield and with Sam Darnold and with a myriad of other quarterbacks. The Panthers are just bad. You talked earlier about make right games. This is a make right game for the Raiders right now. That's what I think a lot of teams are going to be treating the Giants, the Panthers, and the Patriots as this year. They're going to be their make right games if things are going bad. And I think this is a chance for that Raiders defense to build more confidence after they just smacked the Ravens in the mouth last week. It was encouraging as well to see Max Crosby going over to Gardner Minshew and going, "Look, buddy, we got your back." And when he did that, that seemed to click something for Minshew, and he was like, "Oh, okay, these guys, I can be that dude here." And he went out there and he started finding that rhythm again that we talked about last year he had with the Colts. That's dangerous for teams going forward. If the Raiders can keep that rolling this week, if Minshew can go out there, start hitting Devontae Adams for some of those big chunk yards, man, this Raiders team is going to start getting dangerous. The defense is going to feast. And it doesn't matter whether it's Andy Dalton or Bryce Young in there. Max Crosby is going to get after him, and he's going to hit him a few times. And so the Raiders, I think, are just going to treat this as a make-right game, like I said, and they're going to try to get their offense rolling on all cylinders while the defense just does their thing. And the Raiders will win this game, and 6-point spread, yeah, they'll cover that.
as someone who has a Raiders fan in my life, and as I was talking with my old man, I was asking him, so after the benching of Bryce Young, how do you feel about this game? He goes, well, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm scared as hell because this is one of those situations where this is such a Raiders thing for them to go up against the worst team in the league. They switch out their quarterback and they just get curb stomped. Like that
You are
is
right.
that is the most Raiders thing possible after going out there and beating the brakes off of the Ravens. Yeah, sure they won in overtime, but the Raiders had no right doing what they did against that Ravens team last week. And this is just a situation where I go back and I go, man, if the Raiders were to come into the like if I was a Raiders fan, I would totally get being scared and nervous
Hmm.
because they could very easily lose this game.
Yep.
Like I continue to look at it and go, this is a game that's in Vegas, so they're at home. They have all the confidence in, or they should have all the confidence in the
Hmm.
world right now after beating the Ravens in Baltimore. I still think the Raiders are going to win this game. I think they are going, their defense is going to be a little bit too much to contend with for Andy Dalton. I do think Andy Dalton is going to move the ball better than what we saw Bryce Young moving the ball. We know that Panthers offensive line only gave up 4 pressures last week, which is hilarious to think about, only giving up
Right.
4 pressures. Um, the Raiders currently have the best tight end in the NFL right now in Brock Bowers, and you know Gardner Minshew has been able to find him and find him consistently. And when you have that guy going and Devontae Adams was going last week, I think this is just a recipe for success for the Raiders. However, I am picking the Raiders. I do think the Panthers are going to keep this a little bit closer because they are going to come in trying to have this confidence. I think they're going to cover that 6 point spread, but I think if this was 5 point spread, I would choose the Raiders.
That's fair, yeah. And I mean, you make a good point. Andy Dalton's going into this game betting on himself as well. You know, he's likely looking at this going, I'm the backup here in Carolina, but I play well enough. I might be able to get a starting job again next year.
Yeah, it's literally just a point for him where he's just trying to show another team like, hey, you need a quarterback for a season. I'm your guy.
Yep.
No worries whatsoever. I can come in and do that job because
Right.
he's at that
Even for
stage
this
in his
season,
career.
there's teams looking for a quarterback right now. He performs well enough. The Miami Dolphins might pick up the phone and go, hey, well, you part with a seventh round pick for him right now?
Hell, I think the Dolphins right now, if he plays well enough for
Yep.
let's say 2 or 3 weeks, he goes out there and just has pretty good consistent games. Dolphins might even say, hey, we'll give you a third.
Yep.
We need a quarterback to kind of save this season. We have the talent around him and try to go out there and do that. Speaking of the Miami Dolphins, they take on the Seattle Seahawks, where the Seattle Seahawks are 4.5 point favorites up in Seattle.
Yeah, that's not surprising. It's hard to go into Seattle and play and win, and there's no Tua. It's Skylar Thompson. I know that the Dolphins signed Brett Hundley from the practice squad from the Ravens there, but he's not going to be ready to go yet. And even though he can boast the title of Pro Bowler, I mean, he was really only in the Pro Bowl because everybody else was still playing football,
Yeah.
and so I don't think that's going to be the option. And Skylar Thompson, I don't think is going to be anything special. I expect Tyreek Hill to take a bump. I expect the workload for Achan to significantly increase. Right now, the Dolphins are really missing Raheem Mostert. They wish they could have that two-headed beast running because then they might be able to just run the ball to win these games. Seahawks are dealing with it on their side too. No Kenneth Walker out there. He's dealing with an oblique injury still. That being said, Zach Charbonnet filled in admirably last week. Got the job done. Geno Smith has been doing a good job at finding Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't think the Dolphins have it. I think that injury last week completely deflated this team. I don't think they're going to be able to get it back rolling right away. And I think the Seahawks and that defense are going to be able to take advantage of that and squeak out a win here. I think it'll be close though, so I don't I think the Chiefs or the Dolphins will cover that spread, but Seahawks win.
Yeah, I think pretty much a lot of what you're saying is very, very true. I think this is a game for the Dolphins right now. I think they're going to be playing with no expectations. They're going to be. I think McDaniel's is kind of sat this team down and said, "Listen, guys, no one is expecting us to do anything right now. So let's go out there. Let's play free. Let's have a fun time, and let's just go have some fun playing football." And I think the Seahawks have kind of been a little bit overrated this year. Sure, they're 2-0. They beat the Broncos and then they beat the Patriots. They allowed the Patriots to take them to overtime. They allowed the Broncos to have a competitive game against them. I don't think this Seahawks offense is better than what we've seen in years past, and I don't think this defense is better than what they were projected to be. I think this is almost a trap game for the Seattle Seahawks because again, you look at all the situations with Miami, it's just negative, negative, negative. We saw Skylar Thompson take the Buffalo Bills in a really close matchup for a playoff game a few years ago. I'm not willing to say that Skylar Thompson can't go out there and do it. Again, he still has Tyreek Hill. If all Tyreek Hill needs to do is just run a go route to get past whoever is going to cover them for corner, and Skylar Thompson, all he has to do is just toss it up and throw it. Just launch it as far as you can and hope Tyreek Hill can get there before the other guy. And hopefully that you can launch it far enough that Tyreek Hill can just run past his guy, run past the safety. Devon Achane, again, I'm a very, very big believer in him. Again, they would love to have Raheem Mostert back there, but I think that the Miami Dolphins are going to come away with a win this week, and they're going to shock some people, and it's just going to be because they're playing loose, free, just we don't care football.
And what you said about Tyreek Hill, that is the key for me. That if he can get involved in the game, then this team will remain carefree and be able to get the win. But as soon as Tyreek Hill's not getting the ball, he's not getting the yards, he stops having fun. And once he stops having fun, it trickles through the rest of this offense. And so that is my concern is can Skylar Thompson get to Tyreek Hill before Devin Witherspoon does?
Yeah, I think the Dolphins will be able to scheme up ways to get the ball into Tyreek's hand because the second that the ball is in Tyreek's hand, it's honestly like a coin toss to see if it's a touchdown or not. Like that's how dangerous he is with the ball in his hands just due to his speed. And yeah, again, for me, I sit back and I go, I don't think this Seahawks team is as good as people are making them out to be. And so I think the Dolphins are going to come in and shock some people here this week. Baltimore Ravens taking on the Dallas Cowboys, where the Baltimore Ravens -1 point favorites.
Yeah, battle of two teams looking to bounce back from embarrassing losses last week. You know, the Raiders managed to take the Ravens in overtime, as you said, and then the Saints just absolutely dummied the Cowboys. Both teams looking to bounce back. It was hard for me to pick which team was going to have the bounce back here because I hate both of these teams. Like, I was almost tempted to say it's going to be a fucking tie, but I said it after week 1. If the Ravens can start using Derrick Henry the way Derrick Henry's supposed to be used, and that's 20 plus carries a game, letting him tire out the defense, then the Ravens win this. If Derrick Henry touches the ball less than 15 times, Cowboys walk away easy. I'm going to put my faith into Harbaugh over McCarthy and say that the Ravens will find a way to win this game against the Cowboys. It's going to be close, but that spread, it's impossibly close.
Yeah, it's 1 point.
Exactly. And so I'm picking the Ravens to win and obviously cover that spread.
Yeah, these are two teams that are coming off of embarrassing losses.
Mm-hmm.
They are really just kind of looking for answers, I think. kind of hit the nail on the head with the Ravens. It's very simple what they need to do. You brought in Derrick Henry. Run the ball with Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that in the podcast segment that'll be coming out later this week. But it really is a situation for me. I just look at that and go, run the damn ball.
Yeah.
And
Richard Sherman style.
yeah, run the damn ball. And with this Cowboys team, I think this Ravens secondary is kind of a little bit on fraud alert because they're not particularly great. And if Dak and the Cowboys can really start to get things going, it's going to be really, really tricky to stop this Cowboys team. However, I do have a lot of faith in Harbaugh. I look at him and I go, I believe he's going to be able to slow things down and say, listen, we're going to run the ball with Derrick Henry. We saw what the Saints were able to do with Alvin Kamara. Yes, he's more of a pass catching back and he can do multiple things, but he still ran the ball really efficiently. They have Gus Edwards. They have Lamar Jackson all being able to run the ball. If you can do that, you can be more consistent. And I think that is what's ultimately going to cause the Ravens to win this game is they're just going to throw their hands up and go, fuck it, we're running. We are running the ball. We're not going to allow Lamar to throw it once.
I mean, you let Lamar throw it, but you don't let Lamar run it. That's been the problem, is Lamar's doing all the running when he's got all this talent that can run instead now. I get it back in the day when it was just Lamar's legs. That was all they had. And
I still think you have to have Lamar run the ball because he's such an electric athlete. But
well, yeah,
you need to allow your main running guys to run the ball.
Exactly. He should not be leading this team in rushing yards and attempts anymore.
Yeah.
That's the way.
I 100% agree. But you still need to allow him to run the ball occasionally.
You do, yeah.
Like, I think if Lamar gets 10 rushing attempts a game that are designed runs, I'm like, yes, that is smart. But as long as Derrick Henry and is getting 20, as long as Gus Edwards is getting a minimum of 10 attempts, like that's the way that we're moving this offense.
Yeah.
But
and I mean, in terms of desperation too, like both of these teams are having a bit of that right now, but the Ravens much more. You starting 0-3 in the AFC North is not going to bode well for you having an opportunity to win this division. Whereas at least the Cowboys can look at it and go, it's a two-man race. It's us and the Eagles, and the Eagles faltered last week to the Falcons, just like we faltered to the Saints. And so even if the Cowboys don't pull out a win this week, they can go, we can still catch those Eagles for sure. The Ravens, you go 0-3 and you're looking at this division in the AFC North and going, the Steelers might be 2-1 or 3-0. The Browns are likely going to be 2-1. The Bengals have got to pull a win out at some point as well. Like, you can't be last place in this division as we're going into week 4, 5, 6.
Yeah. Moving forward, we have another divisional matchup. This time it is the 49ers taking on the Rams, where the Rams are wait, I think I wrote that down wrong. It is the 49ers minus 6.5 point favorites.
Yeah. Man, I was looking forward to this game a couple weeks ago before all the injuries started happening. This Rams team, week 1, they look like they could be one of the best in the league. With the injuries that have happened now, it's almost already at the point where it's fire sale time, maybe. See what you can get for Matt Stafford. See if somebody wants to trade for him, because no Puka Nacua, no Cooper Kupp, no Tyler Higbee. Like, it's getting slim pickings for this Rams offense to be able to throw the ball. It's basically Kyron Williams and Blake Corum now.
Yep. Well, and then not to mention their defense as well going. It's a young defense that's still trying to learn a lot, and they haven't quite figured it out yet.
Right? And the 49ers, they're not, completely free of this. They, CMC on IR for a short period here as well. But thus far, Mason has been able to fill that role. So, I mean, looking at that, as long as Brock Purdy does as he's told by Kyle Shanahan, this 49ers team will win. And 6.5 points, man, I don't know. This is a tough spread to pick because it is still Matthew Stafford, and we've seen how explosive Kyron Williams can be. He can go off for 150 yards on any given week and end up keeping this game close. And being a divisional matchup, this might be the week that happens. So yeah, I'm gonna pick the Rams to cover this spread, even though the 49ers win the game.
Yeah, I'm also having the 49ers to win this game and the Rams to cover the spread. This is a 49ers team I think kind of got a little bit exposed last week against that Vikings squad where if it's not perfect, it's maybe not necessarily going to be that. I think it was maybe just a little bit of the early season blues from the 49ers in that particular game, but you know me, I have a ton of faith in Kyle Shanahan. I think he's going to have this offense ready to go. Mason has been absolutely phenomenal in terms of the running back. Again, we always joked that when the 49ers traded for Christian McCaffrey, that it was kind of like almost a waste of a pick because Kyle Shanahan can literally put anyone in his backfield and they will be successful as a running back. But you just get Christian McCaffrey and he's going to be otherworldly. But it really is kind of going back to that where it's just Kyle Shanahan, you put anyone in the backfield and they're going to be good. And we're seeing that with Mason right now. And I just think the Rams right now, some of their firepower from this offense is just a little bit lacking. Again, Matthew Stafford is a good quarterback, but if they continue to go down this trend of going up against teams and they just can't get it done, especially because they're not healthy and their defense is so young and a little bit inexperienced here at the moment, it's just going to be a tough. It's going to be trying to skate uphill almost. It's just going to be a little bit too much. I think the 49ers win, but I think the Rams, that 6.5 points, it just feels a little bit too much right now for these two teams that are both kind of dealing with some issues of their own. And I think the Rams will do a decent enough job with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford keeping this game close. But yeah, I think 6 points is very, very fair for the 49ers to beat them. But once you kind of get into that full touchdown territory, I can kind of see some other things as well. Taking a look at the Lions taking on the Arizona Cardinals with the Lions at 3-point favorites.
Yeah, I kind of called it last week, man. I had this
Fuck, did
feeling
you
that
ever?
Marvin Harrison was ready to break out, and holy shit, did he ever! Just in the first quarter alone, he was over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it's almost like after week one, the coach went over to um Mr. Midget and was like,
Oh,
"You
Kyler Murray.
realize,
We
yeah,
drafted you a
Kyler Murray,
superstar.
right?"
We
And he was
drafted you a
like,
cheat code.
yeah, we drafted you, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, what are you doing? Why are you not throwing it to him? He's like, oh right, I have a receiver now, and holy fuck, and that's what I said. He realized that, oh, if I can just extend the play to 4, 5, 6 seconds, then he's open, like wide open down the field. And who in this league is better at extending a play to that length than Kyler Murray? Nobody. Even Lamar Jackson is not as good at extending that play and being able to sling it down the field as Kyler Murray. And so if they can keep this going, they're going to give this Lions defense a run for their money. The Lions, they got to bounce back. They got bullied by the Bucks last week, who should not have been a team at the start of the year that we were talking about being able to beat this Lions. The Lions, I think, came into this season with a little too much swagger, a little too much confidence, thinking that they were the top dog all of a sudden. And they got put in their place last week. So they need to get back to their basics and start playing that same sort of smash mouth football that we saw in week one against the Rams, where it was just grind it out. Don't go for the big, pretty plays. Just get the yards you can get and control the clock, control the game. Ben Johnson, I think, will be able to get things righted this week with that offense. It's going to be a high scoring game. Even if the over under on this one is like 55, I would still be taking the over. I think it's going to be high scoring. It's going to be fun to watch. We're going to see Goff and Murray put up big numbers each. I think the Lions bounce back, though. The Lions bounce back and get the win. The Cardinals, they're going to hang with every team they play with now. Now that they've got that big connection between Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray, it's going to be tough to stop them. But I think they're just one or two pieces away from being able to take over these games. And so the Lions will bounce back this week and get the win. What was the spread again? You said it was
-3 for the Lions.
-3 for the Lions. I don't think the Cards will keep it that close. I think it'll probably be a 4 or 5 point difference, so the Lions will cover that spread.
Yeah, I think this, like you said it best. This is going to be a high scoring game. You have two offenses that are going to be fairly very consistent. I think if the Lions want the best chance to ultimately win this game, they look at Jahmyr Gibbs, they look at David Montgomery, and they say, "Boys, put your track shoes on because you are getting the ball a ton." I would
Yeah.
actually want the Lions to throw the ball less in this game and say, "Listen, we're going to be a ground and pound team." I think that's what Ben Johnson is ultimately going to do, and he's going to basically look at this opposing team with their offense with Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride and say, "Listen, we know we have young secondary for our defense," and I know I'm talking about Ben Johnson as if he's the head coach, but it's like that's what the Lions need to do. They need to basically say, we need to protect our young secondary at the moment. We have two rookies in our secondary, and Marvin Harrison Jr., yes, he's a rookie, but goddamn, he showed what he can do.
Yeah.
You just like what you said. It was like the Cardinals. They went up to Kyler Murray and said, "Hey, by the way, did you realize we actually drafted you a superstar?" And he's like, "Right, I was playing Call of Duty. I forgot. I should throw him the ball. He's probably the best thing to come out of the draft since Larry Fitzgerald in terms of wide receivers." But
Yeah.
I think this Cardinals team is going to be able to stay competitive with this Lions squad, even though they're going to run the ball a ton. They're going to, do some chip shots to Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown. They're all going to get their touches for sure. But I do have the Lions winning this game, but I'm actually going to say the Cardinals are going to keep it close enough to cover that spread.
Yeah, 100%. The Lions got to slow the game down, and using David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is the way to do that. Slow it down, run the ball, keep that duo of Murray and Harrison off the field as long as you possibly can, and then just take your shots over the top when the defense starts to cheat up.
Yeah. You basically have to bait them into putting more guys in the box and saying, "Oh, you guys forgot about, we have a speedster in Jameson Williams, and he's just
Yeah.
gonna burn the top off." Like, "Oh, you
Right.
forgot that Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the best route runners in the game right now. Oh, you forgot about Sam Laporta just going over the middle." It's gonna be interesting as hell to watch.
Yeah.
But next up for our Sunday night football game, where we have the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Atlanta Falcons, where the Chiefs are -3-point favorites in this one.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people this week talking about this could be that game that the Chiefs drop early in the season here. There was a lot of eyes on them last week with how they beat the Bengals and, the favoritism of the refs, a lot of talk of that. And so being Sunday night this week against a Falcons team, there's a lot of talk that maybe some of those calls might not go in their favor and it might go the opposite way. That being said, this defense in Atlanta is not that good. And so I think guys like Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, they're going to be key this week. They've lost Isaiah Pacheco. I can't remember what the name of the backup coming in there is for him, but I have
Carson
a feeling
Steele.
Carson Steele.
He's a
I have a
rookie.
feeling they're going to lean heavily on him just to see if they can catch lightning in a bottle. Because you've got guys like Worthy and Rice that can spread the defense out and then just you utilize Steele the same way you would have been utilizing Pacheco. Just give him that ball and let him pound it up the middle. They got to find a way to get Travis Kelce going as well. But, I mean, this Chiefs team, it's hard to bet against them. And I've seen what the Falcons can do. I mean, Kirk Cousins was able to shock the Eagles last week. I don't know. Do we have a different primetime Kirk Cousins all of a sudden now that he's wearing the Falcons jersey? Like, is he going to turn it on again this week? This was a tough one for me to pick just for that reason, because so many people have been looking at this thinking it's a bit of a trap game for the Chiefs. I still, at this point, am picking the Chiefs to win this, though. Um, I think the Falcons will cover that spread, though. I think what we're going to see is the game end on likely an interception.
Yeah, for me in this game, I understand why people are potentially talking about this being a trap game. Like, oh, the Falcons are a little bit better than what we've been kind of giving them credit after week 1, and obviously they got that big win. But I just look at this Falcons team and I look back at it and say, okay, in week number 1, I'm trying to remember who they played in. Oh, they played your Steelers. They didn't look good against your Steelers on offense or defense. You know, their defense did just enough to allow one of the worst offensive coordinators in the game to put up 18 points due to kicking. Then they went up against the Eagles, and the Eagles, we've already talked about their myriad of issues. This Chiefs team, their biggest issue right now is they don't have Pacheco. That's their only issue. Their defense is still playing great. Mahomes is still Mahomes. Rice and Worthy are really starting to show that they can be a top duo in the league. Travis Kelce, he's older, yes, but this is going to be one of those games where I think is almost a get right game for him, and he's going to finally have an opportunity. And I just, even though it is in Atlanta, I just look at this Chiefs team and I go, unless you're one of the top 5 teams in the NFL with a top 5 quarterback that you know for a fact is going to come in and do what he's going to be capable of doing, I really struggle to look at you and say that you can compete with the Chiefs. We saw what the Ravens did in week number 1. People argue that Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback. I am not necessarily in that department, but you know, he's in that conversation. Joe Burrow, he's been the only guy in the NFL that can actually properly compete with Patrick Mahomes, and we saw what happened there. Kirk Cousins isn't in that category. I don't think this Falcons team is going to be too much. I just know Andy Reid. He does not allow his team to get brought up in these trap game type scenarios. He's just too smart of a coach to allow that. And I think the Chiefs cover. I think the Chiefs win. I think this is going to be a game you're going to have on mute because Chris Collinsworth is going to be going down onto the field and blowing Mahomes every chance he gets. Again, we saw what he did with Caleb Williams last week in the first half, where it was just basically gargling his balls.
Yeah.
But this is a game that I am not worried about for the Chiefs. I think they walk away fairly comfortable with a victory.
Yeah, that's the tough thing. Like, I'm not worried about them either, but, you know, like, the analysts are right. Every year, the Chiefs in the first 8 weeks drop a game to a team that has no right beating them. It happens every year, and it's hard to pick which one it's going to be. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think next week when they go up against the Chargers, I give that a little bit more of a better opportunity. Again, you look at Justin Herbert, Chargers offense, it's kind of those types of things. But moving over to the first of our 2 Monday night football games, where we have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Buffalo Bills up in Orchard Park, where the Bills are minus 5-point favorites.
Right, this Bills team that we were talking about having no weapons and no ability to score at the start of the season, everybody forgot about James Cook apparently. You know, and this team has found a way to get it going. And you know, Josh Allen, it's really seeming like Stefon Diggs was the problem. You know, as everybody suspected, and here it is. You know, Josh Allen's like, I got no star power. It's me and Cook. You know, and they're getting the job done. And this Jags team has been disappointing. You know, like I expected so much more out of them. You know, the fact that they've got Christian Kirk as their number 1 is concerning because they cannot get him going. They need Brian Thomas Jr. to accelerate his development and become the number 1 receiver now because Kirk is not getting it done. And that's just hindering their run game. It's hindering everything for them. And so the Jags, I fully expect them to continue their free fall this week within their division, within the conference, and the Bills are going to shockingly go to 3-0 here with minimal offensive weapons and a, you know, maybe top 15 defense, maybe. it's tough to say, but yeah, the Bills win this game. 5-point spread. I mean, it is possible that the Jags could keep this close. So I think the Jags will find a way to cover this spread, but they'll just make too many mistakes to win this game against the Bills.
Yeah, I initially went into this game saying the Bills are going to win this game, but I had the Jags at +5 to win, to cover the spread. But the more and more that I thought about this, like I just sit back and I go, we talked about what Miami was going to be able to do last week against this against this Bills team, and the Bills shut down Miami completely. Yeah, sure, Tua Tagovailoa basically used his head as a battering ram against a defender, but it was a situation where we look at the Jags, their offensive situation right now is vastly worse than what the Dolphins had, and the Bills didn't really have much concern over that. Trevor Lawrence is going to need to have a special game if they're going to come out and win this one. But I think Josh Allen right now, he's kind of on this almost arc of Mahomes the last few years, where it's like, I'm going to show everyone why I'm a top 3 quarterback in the league. He's trying to make that push to say, like, I can go out there and beat Mahomes. I don't think he's going to get it done this year, and I think he's taking everything that has been said about this team, going, they just don't have it this year. They don't have the star power, and he is going to continue to go with it. He's not going to be undefeated forever, but I don't think the Jags are a good enough team to slow this Bills unit down, especially Monday Night Football in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Like, I just think this Jags team is just going to get too overwhelmed. I think the Bills are just going to sit back and go, we just did what we did to the Dolphins. You think the Jags are going to be able to stop us? I think the Dolphins have a better defense than the Bills, or than the Jags do. And
They do. The issue is that Bills Dolphins, I tend to throw that game out. That is one of these rivalries right now. The Bills just have the Dolphins number. Every time they absolutely dummy the Dolphins. It's like looking at the Ravens and the Steelers, because I'm closer to that. The Ravens are the better team every time on paper, just like the Dolphins always look like they're the better team than the Bills. But somehow the Steelers always win that game against the Ravens, just like the Bills can always beat the Dolphins. So that's why I sort of throw that game out and go, yeah,
I hear you. I do.
The Dolphins, but that's where I'm like, they don't. It's a different team when they're playing the Dolphins to when they're playing the other 30 teams in the league.
I hear you. I really do. I just still think this Bills team, they're playing with that chip on their shoulder of going, oh, no one thinks that we're going to be that good this year. 3-0.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to be 3-0. Like, I don't doubt they're going to
Yeah.
win this game. I don't think they're going to blow out the Jags the way they absolutely decimated the Dolphins.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's like a 28-point difference, but I'm thinking that 5 points, I feel comfortable in the Bills going, like, you know what? We are playing with more confidence than you guys are. Right now, the Jags, they're playing with no confidence. And going up against this Bills team that has something to prove, and even though they're 2-0, it's scary, man. It's scary. Like I said, I just changed my prediction of saying, oh, the Jags can cover that, to me going, no, they can't. But the final Monday Night Football game of this week, and the final game of Week 3, where we have the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Washington Commanders, and the Bengals have a 7-point advantage.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Commanders briefly earlier. They beat the Giants last week with 7 field goals. I don't know if that's going to happen against the Bengals. I don't foresee that happening. The Bengals have got to win at some point. They came so close last week against that Chiefs team. It was decided by a penalty, essentially. The frustration's starting to set in, and when Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase get frustrated, they go off for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. And so this Commanders team has to be careful. I think they have the potential to get absolutely destroyed here in this game. I think the Bengals win this game and try to right their ship right now, because like I said with the Ravens, you can't go 0-3 in this AFC North to start and still expect to win the division. It's not going to work out for you. So the Bengals have got to win this game, and I think the Bengals cover that spread as well. I think they're going to put up big numbers against this Commanders team.
Yeah, the Commanders right now, their offense, with Jaden Daniels, he's been running the ball and he's been trying to do a little bit more of that, but he hasn't been efficient throwing the ball. No rookie quarterback has been efficient throwing the ball so far this year. But this is kind of what I expected from Jaden Daniels. He was going to go into the NFL behind that offensive line and just be running for his life. And that's what we're seeing. And, sure, the Bengals don't have a great defense, but you know who really doesn't have a good defense? The Commanders. And T. Higgins is going to be back this week. We know he is. So guess what? The Bengals have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins for Joe Burrow to throw the ball to. I think this is going to be one of those kind of just pure anger games that the Bengals, they lost to the Chiefs last week. They're going to walk out there and say, listen, this is our house. You're coming in here. We're mad. We're sorry for what we're about to do, young one. It's literally Anakin Skywalker walking into the youngling's temple and going, please, master, save us. And he just shoots out the lightsaber and goes, nothing I can do, buddy. You're gone. This is one of those games for the Bengals. And after the frustration of week 1 and week 2, Commanders, you kind of feel bad for him. Almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Commanders are going to be able to get more done this week on offense than they did last week. The Giants, as bad as they are, they have a good defense. That's I think why they were able to hold that Commanders team to only field goals. I do think Jaden Daniels finds a way to get into the end zone this week, whether it's himself with his legs or some other way. They are going to score a touchdown this week against the Bengals, I think.
I hear you, I do. But that is our game predictions of the week. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us here today. Make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment because it really helps the algorithm find us a little bit more. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan saying peace.